I am a person who's deeply committed towards quality. Quality of the time I spend with myself, quality of the time I spend with others around me, quality of my work that I produce and deliver, quality of the conversations I engage with, and quality of my overall lifestyle. Even the amount of perfectionism that I allow myself to indulge in is rooted in the type of quality I accept for a particular event. Silk Root of Systems as a consultancy, as well as a web series, is certainly my creation. And you see me everywhere in every single text, infographic, video, and post all over the internet. I'm therefore very careful in bringing guests into the show. It is, after all, a knowledge-driven show. The basis for this show is specialized knowledge that cannot be found in classrooms, lecture halls, books, or anywhere else. If you are a first-time viewer, please watch the introduction and other videos and subscribe to the LinkedIn newsletter. Any guest you will see in this podcast, including today's episode, is carefully selected after having good conversations with them and to see how they fit into the theme of the show and how the primary audience, the executives, investors, M&A leaders, benefit from the knowledge and experience of the guest. 90% of the questions are spontaneous and 100% of the conversation is unscripted. Please enjoy. Today's guest is Johan Philip Stam, better known as Hans, someone who has spent much of his career in the place where ambitious ideas meet the unforgiving reality of actually making things happen. Hans spent 7 years in Shenzhen, immersed in the world of hardware, factories, suppliers, product development, and mass production. Over the years, he has helped teams navigate that difficult journey from prototype to something that can actually be manufactured reliably. You already know that the journey rarely follows the beautiful PowerPoint version. Your plans change. Your leadership changes. Maybe even the country of residence change. Your country of operations might change. But Hans stuck through it all. Hans has a beautiful career so far, and there is a lot to learn from this person. Hans has taken those hard-earned lessons and distilled them into his book, The Hardest Hardware Lessons, where he explores the mistakes, the shortcuts, and the decisions that can make or break a physical product. So today, we're going beyond theory. We're talking to the man himself. We're talking factories, China, supply chains, engineering decisions, scaling production, and what really happens when hardware meets reality. Hans, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing very well. I just came out of a meeting where did exactly this, where we made a hard decision, which should have been made a long time ago. My natural rhythm is advising people what to do, and sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. If they don't listen, I'm still 100% behind them, and I want to prove myself wrong. I want to prove them right. But in the end, if I can't prove them right, then, and this can take a few months or even like a couple of years to try to prove them right and to set this challenge for myself to get this done, even though I believe it's not possible. So this is my natural rhythm. This is what I've been doing for the past around 20 years.
You are Dutch by origin, and now you reside in Germany, in Berlin, and you have connections with China. I want to explore that a little bit. What happened with this boy from a quieter town in the Netherlands? And then how did he find China? What happened there?
So I was always a geek, like living in a small farmer's town, very protected from everything, but I was one of the rebels. I wanted to be different. So I got a computer. My uncle actually gave me a Commodore 64, secondhand. And then I got into computers, and I was always very, very quiet, sitting behind my computer. I love computers, like since I first got one. Then when I was 16, my parents decided to move from the Netherlands to Ireland. Then I studied in Ireland for 4 years. I met some Chinese people and I'm like, well, these Chinese people seem very, very clever. And I studied computer science and I had this idea of learning from Chinese people. And this is something that not many people in Europe have. You normally have this only when you're in university, where you respect each other, where you don't think you're on top of the world. So then I asked the dean of my university, hey, can I do an internship in China? And that's why I went to China for half a year. And ever since then, I've been learning from Chinese people and learning how to be humble, because that is something that's specifically in Europe, the engineers, we are not very humble. We think we can know everything by ourselves. We are not very confident by us. We are not very confident, but we are very, very, how to say this? Yeah, protective. And in China, it's the other way around. If you're an engineer, you specifically know how to make like earplugs, or you know how to do like vacuum molding, and no one else in the world knows this very specific little process. And then you know this, so you know you're going to have a job for the rest of your life. And then you just work together with other people who have other knowledge. But here in Europe, the engineering jobs, specifically hardware jobs, are very hard to come by, so they want to protect themselves.
It's really fascinating what you mentioned, Hans. I want to go back to this topic of university education. So there's a lot of information out there in social media, internet, newsletters, everywhere that university degrees are meaningless, it's not needed, etc. I agree to that to a small extent, but then I understand from my experiences in universities, I completed 2 master's degrees from 3 different countries. And the amount of different people and different ideologies, different backgrounds and mindsets I have met during those 7 years, they have, as well as while I was working during that time, same as you. So I would say the amount of cultural exposure you get through university and through your college education, especially in technical programs, it's immense. And it can, if you are that kind of a person who is looking for more from life, if you are that kind of a person who wants to actually embrace life, one of the best things you can do is actually definitely have a technical university degree. However, I also want to emphasize from my personal experience that people should always be willing to do more than their education empowers them, in the sense that the real learning comes through work experience, corporate as well as other experience and life. And wherever life takes you, you should go. But yeah, your connections and your base definitely begins through your education program. Do you agree with that, or do you have something to perhaps color that concept with?
Yes, I agree with that. And I actually didn't finish my university. After I came back from China for my internship, I forgot to finish my degree. I still ended up with a good job at Microsoft, so I don't regret it. But I went through 4 years of university, and I was in university. I was the only white guy. I was the only white boy in Chinese society, because I didn't get along well with I didn't get along well with the local Irish people. And I had a Chinese housemate, and he's like, hey, do you want to hang out with us? Do you want to play World of Warcraft with us? Do you want to play Counter-Strike with us? Do you want to play Mahjong with us? I'm like, yeah, sure. Do you want to eat some delicious Chinese food? Of course I'm going to say yes to that. But everybody else was just busy partying and drinking and going to like the student union, meeting people who they already knew, staying in their comfort zone. And this is what you need to do. You need to leave your comfort zone, specifically at university, because that is when you leave your parents, like the first time that you leave your parents' house. And then that is where you can expand your horizons the easiest.
Yeah. If a person really wants to experience life, if you have the privilege and you have the ability, intellectual ability, absolutely. I think university degree programs definitely provide you with a vast amount of cultural experiences. If you are that type of, and it depends on your trajectory that you're meant to be. I had education in India, but I had various nationalities there. I also had my education partly in South Korea as well. That's why I have a very beautiful fascination with the Far East Asian culture. South Korea definitely broke my shell and absolutely made me devour the world of engineering, and really made me excited towards the possibilities. And the possibilities definitely are endless when you're in Far East Asia. And of course, my education in Norway as well. They were nice for me. various things that I understood about the world from media, etc., were completely broken, and I saw the real world when I was in university. Both of us, we can talk a lot about that. We can write books and essays on it. But today I definitely want to ask you more about your career, Hans. I started Silk Route of Systems thinking about how I would connect my connections in Far East Asia and Middle East towards my connections in Europe. Hans, then let's go towards this interview. Supply chains, right? And this is one of your expertise, and really looking at the various provinces in China that enables certain ecosystems. So I would like to understand, Hans, supply chains are usually optimized for cost and efficiency, and I'm sure China is no different. So what does China do differently than Europe when they are optimizing their supply chains? So, for example, Germany is widely known for automotive and automotive component suppliers and automotive testing suppliers. And because of those facilities, semiconductor industry in the Netherlands was able to improve quite a lot because of the German suppliers that typically served automotives. So what is the difference between the Chinese Gongbang style supply chain and provinces that are exclusively targeted towards one skill set versus Europe? What does China do differently? Do they train them differently? How does it work, please?
So in Europe, we've had the IP system for a long time, like IP protection. And in China, we have this now in China. This has existed for 10 years now in China, but only for 10 years. So there was no way to differentiate except by keeping your connections close. And then standardization, because in Europe we had standardization, but this was also before all the lawyers came in. Standardization is how you control the supply chain. Because if you're the biggest customer for a certain component, then of course you're going to be in control of the supply chain. And standardization is the only way that China has been doing it for the past 40 years. And they are still consolidating the supply chain through standardization, through standard solution boards. If you get like headphones from China, they all use the same chip. They all use the same standard PCB. They just have one or two different components on it, but everything else on the PCB is the same. That is how China is trying to consolidate all the supply chains. In Europe, we don't really do standardization. We do standardization by regulation and standardization by IP law. And this standardization by regulation is the CE certification. If you make a camera, it needs to conform with EN something with some regulation. And in China, that doesn't exist. China is just like, this is the most efficient supply chain, and one company in China has this whole supply chain, like 40% of the supply chain. So if you buy it from anyone else, you're gonna pay a premium.
Okay. Let's say I'm an investor and I want to acquire a company in Europe, but I also want to have benefits from China. And I would come to you and I would ask you, how can my company extend its supply chain? Where should I send my best people to go towards? So how would you help me in that regard?
Yeah, so electronics, most of the electronics are assembled, 80% of the electronics in China are assembled in Shenzhen, in Guangdong province. And then mechanical parts, like specifically CNC parts, they are all consolidated around Humen. And this is because the PCBs, like the boards themselves, you can't make them in the city center of Shenzhen anymore. You have to make them like in the neighboring city, because it's such a polluting process. And regulations have gone so far that you can't produce them in Shenzhen anymore. And in other areas, things are a lot more loose. Someone who used to make PCBs in Shenzhen, and who now figured out how to do it more efficient in a different province for less money with less regulations. Of course, they have moved this to somewhere outside of Shenzhen. Same with, for example, fireworks. There used to be a lot of fireworks being made in Guangdong province, but now most of the fireworks are made in Hunan province, because the government regulations are less strict. And the government also has given land to certain factories because they want to stimulate this specific industry to come there. There's, for example, a whole village in Sichuan, and in this village, it's called Guitar Village. 60% of all the guitars in the world, all the acoustic guitars in the world, are made in this village. They used to be made somewhere in Guangdong province, but then one of the one of the managers there got into an argument with the big boss, and then he's like, "Hey, I can do it myself. I can just buy some land." And of course, he didn't buy land; he got land from the government. And now, like all of his friends, all of his colleagues, everybody in the whole village makes guitars. Same with my wife's hometown, Xiaoyang in Hunan. The whole industry, the whole town relies on the lighter industry, like the cigarette lighter industry. And you can buy a lighter there for 1 RMB. So it's just monetary incentives. It's not really government incentives. It's like someone who knows how to make it. And then they're like, hey, I don't want to work for this big factory anymore. I know how to do it better. I'll just do it in my own hometown, and I'll just hire all of my cousins. And then eventually the government is like, hey, we should probably stimulate people to come here because there's jobs in our village or in our city again.
So very network based in the sense that somebody begins, somebody says, okay, I need this one. I have my network. Let's get them. And then you provide a proof of concept to the government that, okay, it's working. And then the government helps you. Is that correct? Or
it's not that someone needs it. It's someone has learned how to do a specific production skill in a big city like Shenzhen or Guangzhou, and then they're like, hey, I can do this better than I can do this better and cheaper somewhere else. And then the whole network, the whole local network, jumps on top of that, and then the neighbor starts doing it, and another neighbor starts doing it, and then they all start to compete with each other, and this is how you get efficiency. Instead of working for one big factory, you open like 5 or 6 different factories in your hometown, and everybody in your whole family starts working in this industry.
how is that different then? I'm talking about like culturally at this point. Forget government, forget regulations. How is it different? And why can't I do that? Why will I not be able to do that in Europe or in America?
I don't know if it is different. I think this is also how the Mittelstand here in Germany grew up and how it started. And this is also what now a lot of Chinese companies are doing. They come to Germany and they either look to acquire a Mittelstand company, like KUKA from France was acquired by Media in Foshan. And they're like, hey, we can learn how to build a Mittelstand in China. And this is what the Chinese government also wants. They want to build like specific industrial zones, just like we did here in Germany. I'm not sure if there's a difference.
Would you say there's a difference with the American culture? If there's a comparison that you can make?
I think so. For example, so I've never been to the US, but I'm sure that what's it called? The place where all of the cars used to get made, Detroit. I think Detroit also started in a similar way. I think every market consolidates around a certain town. And you just have like a main factory, and then all of the suppliers just come there. So in China, it was very clear. Like I said, someone who worked in a guitar factory in Guangzhou, and he didn't want to live in a big city because big cities they have too much competition. And he's like, I want to move back to my hometown, start a family, and I can do this myself cheaper and better because the boss didn't listen to me, and I know how to do this better in my hometown.
Can you perhaps give more examples on the overall supply chain and the different vendors that are already available for semiconductor industry and aerospace industry in China?
Yeah. So here in Europe, we have NXP, we have ST Micro, and they're fine, but because the biggest industry in Europe has always been the automotive industry. So they focus on the automotive industry, and they have like 4 sectors: it's automotive, industrial, consumer, something else. But in Europe, it's always been the biggest allocation has always been with automotive. So if you build anything that's not automotive in Europe, you just will not get enough allocation. And that is what is wrong with the supply chain here in Europe. It's just all automotive. In China, there's still these 4 different segments, and there's still enough volume in different sectors that are not automotive where you can get allocation. And then, of course, there's companies that have made copies, so like have made iterations that are similar to ST. This is the meeting I had 1 hour ago. Like we should not be using ST because we don't have enough power with ST because they're automotive. We should use someone who makes chips also from TSMC, also in Taiwan, also from AES in Taiwan, but they have allocation and they focus on the consumer industry. They don't always focus on automotive. And then we can get components with like 12 weeks lead time instead of 52 weeks plus allocation, because 52 weeks plus allocation means you're not getting anything. And they can't even keep those promises these days. And of course, the Chinese people from mainland China have better relationships with the people from Taiwan who produce the chips than the Europeans who sit far away in the offices on the other side of the world with Taiwan. And of course, the Chinese people also have better cultural compatibility, and also have bigger orders to TSMC and to AES.
So if there are semiconductor vendors, could be for equipment, for PVD, CVD processes, other deposition processes, perhaps even cutting tools. So it could be equipment, but it could be also smaller components, specialized components. It could be even as something small as an O-ring, right? For vacuum pumps, etc. Are there areas in China which is specifically dedicated towards semiconductors? So just like you mentioned, I think Shenzhen is for PCB. So do they look at it as PCB or do they look at it as an industry itself? That's something I want to understand.
They look at it as an industry, and specifically SMIC is in Longgang, part of Shenzhen. And then there was a guy who wants to open a fab in Changsha, I believe. But I don't think TSMC is reliant on China for their supply chain. For the customers, of course, they want to sell to China. And it's the same with NVIDIA, right? NVIDIA wants to sell to China, but they're not allowed to sell to China. But I'm not sure to what extent TSMC is reliant on China for their components, because their machines are really high precision, and high precision equipment. I'm sorry, China cannot make high precision equipment. Even if you look at pick and place machine, if you go to a Chinese factory, they always tell you how proud they are of using like a Japanese a Japanese pick and place machine or a German pick and place machine. They're very, very proud of using that instead of a Chinese one, because that means that they've made a higher investment cost, and that means that they value them more, and they're willing to pay a higher price because they're looking for better quality. Also, a lot of CNC machines, they are still like a lot of CNC machines are still made in Germany and they're still made in Japan. And factories in China are very proud to show off, look, we have all of these Japanese machines, we have all of these German machines.
What is the reason behind it? Or is it simply a strategy that, okay, we will bring in high precision machines from Germany and Japan, perhaps even US, Netherlands, and apply towards it? Is that a strategy or is it a roadmap that we don't see?
It's a strategy. It's a short-term decision because it's a very low trust society, and it's cheaper to buy the machine now than to spend 10 or 20 years or to wait for someone 10 or 20 years to finally develop it, because they need it right now. And even the Chinese government, even the universities, they're like, no, it's better if you just buy it now and then learn faster than to do your own core research. It's very hard to do core research in a Chinese university. That's also why a lot of Chinese universities, they still hire people from the West, from Germany or from Japan to teach at the universities, right? I have not seen it the other way around, like Chinese from like Tsinghua or Fudan going to Europe and giving like a keynote speech at a university or giving lectures at a university. Maybe it should be this way, but I haven't seen it.
By the way, I have witnessed it during my master's in micro nanosystems, and there were a lot of professors coming from China, and a lot of the textbooks were actually either co-authored or authored directly from China by a Chinese university. So there's a lot
That's good to see. That's good to see.
Yeah, indeed.
I'm happy about that.
Geopolitical tension goes around on depicting China in a particular manner. My experience with China is completely different. Completely different. I just feel I have a lot to learn from them, and I definitely could also have an influence on them. That's just my feeling so far. But I would let you continue, Hans. You were on a story. You were on a roll. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good to see. But at the same time, I haven't seen any like Chinese production equipment here in Europe. I would like to see more Chinese production equipment, because probably the Chinese industry has learned so much from the Western industry and from the Western machines, and they have made so many improvements that they could make their own machine and then export it here back to Europe.
Interestingly, I have seen that part.
I've also seen that part. I went. I went there 3 weeks ago, and it's happening.
Globalization and localization. Is that localized? Yes. Tell me, Hans. Tell me about it.
So there's this company in Dongguan, and they are selling reflow ovens from China, and they're actually selling a whole SMT line from China because they're like, hey, you can buy this from Siemens, and from Siemens it's going to be like a $5 million, but or you can just buy it from us, and it's going to be less good quality, but it's going to be like it's going to be 1/10 of the price. And you're going to learn a lot faster, and you can actually afford it. And with Siemens, you pay a license, and with these guys, like you just pay for the equipment. I have the whole customer list. For some reason, they shared it on Google Maps, the whole customer list. So they're exporting to everywhere in the world. Not much to Europe because Europeans, we don't have SMT lines anymore. We prefer to buy them from Siemens, apparently. But I'm buying one of these lines. One of my friends in Amsterdam is also buying one of these lines. One of my friends in Stockholm is also buying one of these lines. So this is coming, and Chinese production equipment is coming to Europe. Whether we like it or not, it's happening.
Yeah, it is happening. And so that brings me to something. I have used Chinese products and really made by China, in China, even a Chinese brand and everything. I've used products, whether it is in my professional life, in the high-tech world, or whether it is in my personal life. Is it really true that the quality is different? Of course, in some areas, yes. But if they have to sell to Europe, there is a certain QC certification required. There are different regulations required to export to Europe. So they have to adhere to those laws anyway, to those regulations anyway. So can you help me understand a little bit on the quality side for this regard?
I think this thing about stuff being cheap in China and things being like low quality in China. Well, if you want something cheap, like these headphones, they are like $10, and they are knockoff of some Sony headphones, which are like $100. These things are going to last me for 2 months, and if I know that they're going to last me for 2 months, I'm fine with that. And the Sony headphones are going to last me for like 2 years probably. It's just if you think China is cheap and you're gonna make something cheap in China, then you're gonna get bad quality in China. If you want something good quality in China, this is a flip or zero. It's $200. It's like, and it's really well engineered by good engineers in China. It's just a cost. It's not a quality. And it's either like you pay the cost up front or the consumer pays the cost later on, right? So
Exactly.
it's just a misconception that made in China is cheap. No, it's just if you pay a little bit of money, then you only get a little bit of quality. That's
Indeed.
the only thing. Economics,
right? And then also your dedication, because I have had face-to-face conversations with Chinese suppliers when I was consulting an automotive company, actually. The dedication when they come to a meeting, the preparation that they have done when they come to a meeting versus suppliers from other areas in the world, there's a stark difference. I want to understand a little bit more on that one. How does a Chinese company from, let's say, manufacturing, right? I know China also has good R&D facilities now. That country has everything. I understand that part. But let's say it's a manufacturing facility. I have acquired a company recently. I'm the investor, and I have asked one of my program managers to go and figure certain things out. And I'm now a program manager. I have come towards the manufacturing facility in China. How seriously will I be taken if I have no contacts so far? You do not know me at all. You're a Chinese manufacturing facility manager. Or even the director there. You have no understanding of who I am. You have zero trust that I will ever pay you. You have no understanding that the hours your engineers or your project managers will spend will actually yield value at the end. So how would you approach it? Would you look at the brand? Because you have no reference point working with me. How would you approach me?
So a lot of factories also do market research, and they have their targets. They have their targets customers that they want to sell to, or they have to target industries, and they understand the industry very, very well. And if they see that you have no history, that you're just a small startup company, of course they can help you, and they can do production. You're going to pay a higher price than your competitors who already are in the industry, because you're a higher risk, and they're going to charge you for every single thing. If you are an already existing customer, there might be less engineering cost, or they can share the engineering cost. It really depends on your network. And if you have no network, you're going to pay a higher price. If you want to get a network, then you need to find someone who's worked with this factory before and get an introduction through that.
So there's an entry fee into their domain, into their world.
I mean, it's risk levels, right? Like, what kind of risk do you want to take? And if you are nobody, or if you don't know anybody in the industry and nobody knows you in the industry, it's a higher risk for that.
So let's say I'm still a well-known company. I might not be TSMC, but I'm a well-known company. But I have no prior relationships with that particular Chinese manufacturing hub. I have no relationships. Perhaps I heard about them, they heard about me. How would the director, how would the business relationship start then? Do they already have a risk analysis on most of the companies around the world, or do they start with a different type of questioning? How does it all work out?
So it's the same as what I said. So if you don't know anyone in the factory, but maybe maybe the factory also asks around in their network, like, hey, have you heard of this company before? Have they been paying the bills? Do they have any legal disputes? This is also the thing with the social credit score in China. It's a social credit score for companies. You can look up what is how many lawsuits they have, how many lawsuits they have resolved, and how much outstanding debt they have. It's not a social credit score per person. It's a social credit score per factory. So every time I go to a factory, I look up the factory, I look up their company number, and I find out in the national government system if they have any lawsuits against them. And this is also something that they can do. Even, for example, me personally, for example, they can find someone in Germany, and they can find someone in Germany then who can then get my credit score, my Schufa credit score here in Germany, and then through this they can do a risk assessment. They will not do this most likely, but they can also do this with German companies. They can find out what is the risk assessment here in Germany.
Wow. Okay.
Because the systems exist everywhere. These credits
That is true, Hans. Let's come to our favorite topic, because you and I, we're both in the world of hardware. Where do you think Europe has become dangerously dependent on the capabilities it no longer controls? And which of those capabilities are actually realistic to build locally? Is there any reason that companies in Europe should even think about manufacturing them locally? Is it even profitable to do that, or is it just better to partner up?
So from a societal point of view, I'm a peace-loving hippie, and I love peace. But if you need any advanced equipment, like any advanced components for defense, you need to be ready when like in peacetime, and you need to have capacity to give to factories in peacetime, because otherwise you're not going to have capacity in wartime. And that is what the consumer industry is. The consumer industry is your backup during peacetime. And if you don't have this consumer electronics industry, then you cannot be ready when it's not peacetime. So that is also why I focus on the supply chain. And I think there are certain things like data security. This is very, very well regulated here in Europe now. And so, for example, all of these AI toys, all of these AI gadgets, I'm not a big fan of these AI toys. It's data gathering devices. They should be made and can be made here in Europe. Most of the chip vendors that are still being used in China, NXP, Nordic, like ST, if they can just be a little bit more flexible, less focused on automotive, then we can build SMT lines here in Europe. But at the moment, we don't have the capacity to do this. We don't have the lines to do this, because the lines are all being occupied for defense, because we are in a war or something. But after this war, we need to build up this consumer electronics industry here in Europe. We might even have to subsidize it, and we might have to do some currency manipulation ourselves, even though it's against the WTO rules, because that's what China has been doing. But you know where China learned this currency manipulation? They learned this from Germany. So hey, we've done this before. Then maybe we should do the same, right? But this is not the hardware, this national policy, and maybe we should do something like this.
It's a different topic. That goes a little bit beyond my expertise to properly comment, Hans, but it's a very beautiful thought to think about. So I'm definitely going to keep this in the video for everyone to think about this topic. However, Hans, I want to understand a little bit. So my question also was, is it worth it though? To build a ecosystem completely in Europe or around its allies? Is it really worth it? Or is it not better to partner up with China?
Is it worth it from a personal point of view? Most people will say no. Most people will not want to make this sacrifice. But from a society point of view, it is definitely needed.
This is where I want to go in, and that's where we go towards our abundance mindset and our sovereignty mindset. We need to talk about this. Why would a normal, and why should somebody who's not an engineer, not an innovator, even have a personal preference on this, right? I'm putting it out there. I'm putting that question out there. And why should I, as a government, worry about what John from Gelderland is personally preferring or not, while I know that country in general, collective, we will benefit from partnerships with China.
When I was living in the Netherlands, in a small town, I went to 3 different places. I went to a Chinese food packaging facility in my village. I went to a cookie factory, and I went to the police station. And then the teachers were like, where would you like to end up? Well, the Chinese food packaging manufacturing, okay, that's you just put stuff in boxes. Or would you like to make something that's I like to make stuff with my hands, and I don't like to end up in jail. And if you don't work for the factory, then you're going to eventually end up in jail, right? So I like to have jobs. And we have so many immigrants here in Europe now. And all of these immigrants, they want to work. They don't want to be drug dealers. They don't want to be criminals. They want to be able to pay tax and contribute to society. They want to build society. If you want to build society, that means you want to have a job. And if you don't give them a job, they'll find something else to do. So people who are new to who are new to Europe, these immigrants from the Middle East, they all want to come here and they all want to make money. They all want to work. So they're already motivated, right? And then it's just the higher educated people. So higher educated people here in Europe, they're like, I want to build a factory. I want to build this, and then you become an engineer. But everything else can be done by immigrants, and they want to make money, and I want to help them. People need to work because they feel needed, and that's just the way it is. People want to feel purpose. Give them a purpose and allow them to find their purpose.
That's a good perspective, and there are various different perspectives on this one. During supply chain architecture, I always, when I consult companies, I always explain them that having dependency on one supplier, whether it is Chinese or American or German, does not matter. Having dependency for customized parts, specific, customized, precise parts. If you have dependency on, and it happens a lot in semiconductor and aerospace, by the way. In automotive, everything is mass produced. So if you have those customized parts, which is very, very in small quantity, perhaps annually only 100 of them you need. And then even from those 100, you just only need 30 actually. So from that perspective, I definitely want a diverse supply chain architecture. I want options. I want relationships with various different global suppliers. But from that perspective, partnering up with China is valuable. And when it comes to jobs for Europeans who require jobs at any level, or whether it is Europeans who are naturalized from any origin who require jobs, there is still possibility for partnerships globally for companies, and also having jobs for them, for the people who need jobs. So what do you think about that? Why is it portrayed as either or? What are the challenges for having both parts?
Yeah, so I'm also a big believer in building bridges, and I love bridges. I don't like walls. I live in Berlin, and we should be building bridges all the time.
Yeah, never let that wall come up ever again. No.
Exactly, but certain people want to have this wall up now. But I'm completely for bridges. But it's from a physics point of view, hey, we have resources in the ground here in Europe. Why would we have to ship it all the way to China and then back to Europe to consume? We consume here in Europe. Why can't we produce in Europe? And people in China consume in China and they produce in China. Why can't we have this balance? Just from like normal physics point of view? Like, why do we need to ship all of this across the world?
China, by its nature, it has been historically secluded in the sense that historically that is their nature, that they have always wanted to do things on their own. And they are powerful. There are different dynasties over there since 5,000 years. It's been extremely powerful. Factories in China are not something new. They've had factories since a long time ago, and they called it some other thing, I'm sure. But why is it that it is so complicated and different in Europe to build a strong system like that? My theory would be that China, historically, their idea is to always have a unified language. There's a simplified Mandarin and a classical Mandarin, sure. But actually, different parts of China had various different languages, and then they were termed as dialects, and now it's just Mandarin. So there's a little bit of, I would say, authoritarian way of controlling. Somehow the Chinese people are quite satisfied with their government, whether it is because of lack of information or something else. I have no idea. You can even elaborate on that part. I think I gave the answer already, but what do you think it's just so different for Europe to be able to form ecosystems in Europe?
I think in Europe, the social bonds have been broken. In China, people are okay if they're okay suffering for their whole life, as long as they see that their kids are going to have a better life. And even they're even okay being displaced from their village and then living in an apartment. They're okay with this because they see the society changing in their lifetime. In Europe, we have not seen our society improve in our lifetime. We have heard stories. We've heard stories about war. We've heard stories about crisis. We have not seen anything like a crisis in Europe for the past, I don't know, like 70 years. That is the difference. We are super individualistic here in Europe. In Europe, we think we are the best. We have NIMBY policies everywhere. We have like rare earth minerals all over Norway and Sweden. And we can just dig it out. But people are like, no, we shouldn't be doing this because of nature. And yes, I love nature and I love going there. But eventually, if you want to build anything, then you might have to make a sacrifice. And you might have to extract it, but maybe extract it in a different way. And in China, they're like, the government is like, okay, we're just gonna replace these people in this village, and they're gonna have a better life in the city. And we're just gonna get all of the rare earth out of the ground in that little village. And people are okay with that. And in Europe, that will never happen. They try to do this in Romania. And in Romania, they have this whole polluted area where the lake is full of lead pollution or whatever. Oh no, I think they were extracting gold. And during the communist times, this was still okay to do. This was still accepted. But now in Europe, we can't do this anymore.
2 questions on that. First of all, how good is the nature area in China? They still protect their nature, right? Even though they utilize their mineral resources and their natural resources very well. They're building a nuclear fusion power supply, by the way, which is a very beautiful thing to read about and think about. So I want to understand how much preservation do they have? How much concern do they have on their natural resources?
So I think they're very dogmatic about this. And this is the way we should also think in Europe. The more people move to the cities, the more space nature will have. So let's just move everybody to the city, and then you have efficiencies in the city, and then nature will have more space. It's just that easy. And nature in China is amazing. And the village where my wife comes from is not nature, but there used to be 3,000 people living there. Now there's only 400 people living there. Most of them are very old or very young. And now nature is coming back, and you can have nature walks. And it reminds me of the Lake District. Like when I was small, I always went to the Lake District in the UK. And the people who live there, they're like, oh no, this is just normal life. I'm like, this is so fucking beautiful. Why don't you appreciate this? And they're like, yeah, but there's no jobs here. I'm like, okay, well then you should find a job in the city, and then you should come back here and make something like the Black Forest. It looks like the Black Forest. We went back.
Right. Yeah.
It's really, really, really beautiful. But people need to move to the cities where the jobs are, where the money is. and then they can enjoy the nature during the holidays.
And historically, Chinese villages and people have been more, I would say, cooperative with the government in uprooting their lives towards the betterment of society. Is that correct?
Maybe. I have no comment on that. Of course, there is big problems in China. So we were driving on a highway. So this is my wife's perspective, right? We were driving on a highway, and I said this highway is amazing, and this high-speed train is amazing. But my wife is like, yeah, well, you know who built all of this? It's all the farmers. Like it's the village leader who gets the money from the government, and the village leader forces all of the farmers from the nearby villages to work on this highway for free. So, thing or not, it happens. But so of course, they see that if there's a highway closer to their village, like on the long term, that their life will improve because there's a highway closer to their village.
Wow.
Because there's more money coming into that area.
And that's because of the trust they have with the government, isn't it? Or not? Or is it just a thing they do?
It's the trust in the central government. It's not a trust in the local government. So there's protests all over China. There's 100 protests per day in China.
Oh, that's nice. Good.
But of course, like I don't know if you read this. I'm reading this at the moment. It's a very Machiavellian society. It's really like people trust people from the village. People who trust people from their hometown and from their family, and they trust the big government. And the big government in Beijing, they always blame the local government, and they always fire the local government people to keep the people happy. But in general, it's a very low trust society. My wife, she does not talk to anyone except from her university or from someone from her hometown. Even here in Germany, it's very hard for her to find a Chinese person that she trusts because they're not from her hometown. And this is also again this is with the language thing. Like you are saying that everybody speaks Mandarin. No, they don't. They really don't.
That's what I meant. I wanted to touch that point because the government says, the Chinese government says that it's Mandarin, but it's actually not the truth. Elaborate on that one, Hans, please. Let's go into that one.
So my mom-in-law does not speak Mandarin. She speaks kind of like the same kind of Mandarin as me, like not very well. She always talks in her hometown language, and in her hometown you always speak your hometown language, and it's a language. It's not a dialect. China is a culture pretending to be a country. It's not a country. Every province in China is different. If you're from a different city, like every city has like 3 million people, and if you're from a different city, you don't understand each other. You have a similar language, but it's still very, very hard to understand. My wife's granddad, when I met him in the village, he talked to me in the hometown dialect. And he told my wife, I did not understand it at the time. I speak a little bit of the dialect now, but he told my wife at the time, your husband is from northern China because he has white skin. But this guy, like he didn't even think that there's a thing outside of China. Like China is just like everywhere. Yeah. Everywhere is just China.
Indeed,
this is also the world. This was also the same with my grandma in my hometown. She left my hometown. She was 104 years old. She left my hometown twice, and she just lived there for all of her life. Like wow, this is like, but she was happy and she was satisfied with her life. And she only spoke the local good dialect. If she would have gone to a city like to Utrecht or to Arnhem, people wouldn't even understand her. So I don't think this is unique to China or to Europe.
First of all, yes, of course, we are well traveled. Most of the people in the audience in this podcast, as well as people who I'm connected to, most of us and your network, of course, we're all people who go around. We are actually citizens of the world. That's perfectly fine. But I also want to add this one particular topic, is that one particular part is that we are not better. We are not better just because we have traveled or seen a little bit of the world or have talked to someone different than us. I really don't think we have accomplished anything better. Nothing, not zero. And I say this with this is not humility. This is not anything political. This is the real absolute truth that I know from experience. Your grandma, 104 years old, massive respect to that lady. Yeah. Who have been a cultural pillar of that ecosystem. That ecosystem needs her. That ecosystem there is definitely something where she is a pillar for. I'm sure. I don't know what exactly, but she's a pillar. Yeah. People come to her for a particular purpose, and without her, things would be not that great for that ecosystem. Every human being here on this planet, we are born for a particular trajectory. Hans, you have your trajectory with China and Europe. so beautiful. And I have my trajectory, which is connecting the whole world, and I'm doing it. It's not because I'm better than anyone. It's just my trajectory. That's it. It's just how my brain is wired. So, and so this is something I really want to touch, where how important it is for the local people who are in one environment. It also goes to the Gongbans of China, that how important it is for them to feel empowered that yes, they're contributing something to the wider economy, and the government is also perhaps encouraging them. How is the government encouraging them? I want to understand. And how proud do they feel that let's say it's a village who's developing, I don't know, PCB boards, for example. Tell me, how proud do they feel? How much enthusiasm they have from their side? Also help me understand what will happen if I go there with no connections, nothing. How will they treat me with my skin, my hair, whatever? How will they treat me?
So there's, in every village and every city, there's the curious people that are very curious about outsiders, and there's non-curious people. And as I said, no judgment, but when I also, in my village, like, it's a very, very Protestant village, very conservative village. And when there was, and then there was a refugee from Africa, and everybody was just laughing at him. He was the first black person in the village. Everybody was just laughing at him and like calling him monkey and this kind of stuff. But I became his friend, and I was like, "Hey, where are you from?" Well, and we just became friends, and I just approached him on a human level. And it's the same in China. Like in every village, every society, there's the curious people, and there's the people who are not so curious. It's just the way how society works.
Yes. And even non-curious ones, they have a purpose. They're doing something. They're keeping a structure alive, and that is also very important for the economy. Yeah, please.
Yes. So also in my wife's hometown, there's only 400 people. And okay. So first of all, in a city, like in a small city in China with like 1 million or 2 million people, I stand out very, very well. Everybody's like, "No, you're just family." Like no one says like you're a foreigner. They're just like, "Hey, come hang out, at our house." And some people are like, they don't know that there's a foreigner in that town. And they're like, "Oh, they have big eyes," and they're like curious. So I don't know, like in a small society, people are very, very inclusive and they embrace the outsiders. In a little bit bigger society, like you stand out a bit more, and I don't know. It's very curious. It's very interesting how societies work. And then in the big cities like Shenzhen, I don't get opposed, I don't feel like a foreigner anymore because everybody is so used to foreigners. I was sitting in a car from a party from Shukho to Bao'an, and I was talking to the Didi driver, so to the Uber driver, in Chinese, and he didn't look at my face, and I was talking to him in Chinese. And then like after 20 minutes, he's like, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "Look at my face, I'm a foreigner." And he didn't realize that I was a foreigner. I'm like, "Wow, this is really interesting." Normally I get very strange looks, but they're very, very now like inclusive. And also, there's also a big difference between foreigners who live in a big city, like Shenzhen. When they meet other foreigners, they're like, "I don't want to talk to other foreigners. I'm the only foreigner around here. I have my own ego." But then if you live in a smaller city, and if you've met a foreigner, you're like, "Oh, please, foreigners. Oh, you're my friend. Oh, where can we buy hamburgers? Where can we buy bread? Where can we buy cheese?" We're best friends, like the moment we meet each other. It's really curious how people react when they're part of different societies. Or not part of different societies, right? Because in Shenzhen, I guess in big cities, there's some kind of foreigner society, but in smaller towns, there's no foreigner society, so you still need to build it.
Yeah, this is interesting. So let's go back to the supply chain perspective and the Chinese society, where different villages are, I would say, particularly entrusted with one type of business and one type of skill. Does it come from the government side, or is it really that people already have that skills because of their familiar bonds and their friendships and their network, and then the people decide, okay, we are now a village that produces PCB boards. So how does it work? Where does it come from? Does it come from grassroots, from people, or does it come from initiatives from the government?
It really comes from grassroots. It really comes from one guy, and then everybody is working together, and then eventually the government is like, "Hey, how can we help? How can we help extract more money from these people?" but it really comes from the grassroots.
Does the person have to now fill up a form and check some boxes that, okay, I have 200 people with me or 500 people with me? Or is it more of a conversation with the government, and the government sees value and then the government starts investing? How does it work?
The government does not invest. The government owns land, and that is how the government invests. So there's a villager, so there's like 10 villagers, and they want to start a factory, and then the government is like, yeah, we can rent this land to you guys for the next 20 years. That is the only involvement that I see that the government really has. And then of course they only want to give this to people who they think they will be successful in the future.
It's very interesting because I was born in a country where land is yours because you paid for it. And of course, public roads belong to the government. And if the government wants to build a road, the government has to pay you, especially agricultural lands. Agricultural land is primarily, it belongs to family and lineage.
Yes. And that is also the way it is in China. But still, the family leases it for 99 years, and this lease has been started since 1949. So no one knows what happens in 2048, right? And even if you have a mortgage, or if you own a house, or if you own a piece of land, no one is allowed to own a piece of land. It's the government's land, and if they want to expropriate the land, they can do that. This is just a basic law in China. The government owns the land. Of course, you have right to use the land for a certain amount of time if you're from the village. And then if you move away from the village and if you do your registration in the city, then you forfeit this right to use the land. But ultimately, it's the government who owns the land.
How fulfilled and happy the people are with this arrangement?
I believe that they think that this is needed, this kind of control, because otherwise it will just become the land of the jungle. Because there's no way to enforce anything. There's no police force. In the villages, there's no police. There's just one government person. He owns the duty to allocate land to a certain amount of people. And if you want to build a house on a certain piece of land, then you need to ask the government person, hey, am I allowed to use this land? Or can I rent this land for the next 20, 40, 50 years to build my house?
And then the level of corruption, does the government make sure that the person who is entrusted with the responsibility of allocating lands, etc., basically he's a custodian. How does the Chinese government ensure that corruption does not flow into the process?
They do not. And this is also what you see with a lot of people who live in the countryside and who are on welfare. The person in charge of the village is supposed to be in charge of allocating welfare to the villagers. And a lot of times they don't. They just keep the money.
And yet there are ecosystems being built and companies flourishing. But
yes, so that is in the cities, that's in the larger towns where there is some kind of rule of law, and there is some more enforcement. But in the villages, there's people don't trust the local government. In the bigger towns, people also don't trust the local governments. In the cities, there's more rule of law. And this is also the interesting part about China. If you are in a big city like Shenzhen, it feels like you're in 2050. It feels like you're in the future. But then if you travel for 5 hours to the provinces, to the farms, it feels like it's the Middle Ages, right? So you can basically time travel. In 5 hours, you just travel 500 years back in time.
That is also something interesting. Japan and Korea have done, I would say, fantastic in preserving their history. And when I read Japanese and Korean history, even the way of writing, even the way of preserving their history, the origin is definitely Chinese. So the Chinese emperors began naming their dynasties by their family names and showing what this dynasty achieved and then what that dynasty achieved or did not achieve. And that's how the history is written. So China has a good amount of history written. A lot of Japanese history, I would say 90% of the Japanese history is actually written by the Chinese historians. That's why there's a little bit of, you need to take stories with a pinch of salt when you hear it about the Japanese history as well. So I'm talking from a Chinese person's perspective. When I walk around in the city where my ancestors have worked hard to build, how much do I see of my ancestors in the city? What does the government do to preserve the history and make me feel like I belong here and I am I am meant for here? How good is their history preservation within their environment?
In the city, again, there's a big difference between cities and countryside. In the city, that's where the conquerors live, and this is that's where the successful people live. So in the city, you can see temples, and you can even see like new parts of the city that are supposed to look like 200 years ago, like what a village looked like 200 years ago that was there. That is in the city. In the village, it's cultural eradication. It's eradication of the minorities. Like if you used to have your own family traditions, these things have now disappeared. Temples, there's this ghost temple in a village that I visited. It's a really, really dark temple. It's really about like bitterness. And this village, this temple now stands behind a bigger temple, and the bigger temple is supporting all of the good things in life. But this ghost temple, this ghost monk in that temple, this is really creepy. This is going to be demolished because the government doesn't want to have any like negative feelings. They don't want to have this kind of ghost stories. That is in the countryside.
And it's interesting because in countries like India, India is actually historically much further than China. It existed a bit longer than China, and there are several layers of history, and the history is very poorly written, very, very poorly written in India. But then there's always this conflict between temples and mosques and mosques built on top of temples, and even the Taj Mahal is rumored at least to be built on Hindu relics. Does that happen in China though? Because there is so many dynasties of emperors, and perhaps each dynasty builds their monuments or their history or their government on top of the work done by previous dynasty, and then somehow they want to cover up something that was done by their predecessors. Can you help the audience a little bit on that one? How much of Chinese history should we know, and then how much perhaps is modified? And as is in every country, by the way, history is always written from one perspective.
From the victors. Yeah. Yes. It's always from the victors.
Always the victors. So that's how it is. So please help the audience here.
Yeah, China is really leaning into their cultural heritage, and the cultural heritage, this is what is created by the Chinese government to try to create some cultural coherence. And every city, even also new cities, they all have their own old town, and the old town is maybe like 2 or 5 years old, so it's being created by the Chinese government. Well, in the villages, you see the real culture, and you see the real destruction of culture. And of course, in the 70s, there's no preservation of anything. Everything was just destroyed by the Cultural Revolution. But China is definitely trying to. It's called Hanfu. So the Chinese government really wants to look like the Han Dynasty, and that's why the Hanfu clothing, the clothing from the Han Dynasty, is very, very popular. And you take pictures, like you go to a tourist town, it looks like an old town, but actually it's just a new town, and you dress up and you take pictures and you embrace your cultural heritage. Of course, there's also like entertainment parks, and like in the minority areas, there's like special dances, and there's like and you can like drink alcohol and eat the fresh dishes from the minorities. Minorities also celebrated, but if you live in a big city, minorities are not celebrated. If you are Muslim and you live in the city, you used to be able to actually have knives and guns, and you used to be able to sell like marijuana, and you used to be able to buy weed from the guys behind the train station. And all of these guys, they are now not in China. They're not in Shenzhen anymore, because they're not tolerated in the big cities. Of course, like in the small towns where they are from, in the Muslim areas of China where they're from, that's still where they're celebrated, and that's still where they are. But in the big cities, you're supposed to conform.
And why did the Chinese government actually select Han Dynasty as their preferred? Because there were many dynasties. Why did Han Dynasty become the norm?
So 80% of the people in China are Han Chinese. So that's the answer. It's just a minority that it's just a cultural one.
That's interesting. Yeah.
This is,
And then
I think even the Ming Dynasty, or oh no, the Yan Dynasty, they were from Manchuria. Then the Ming Dynasty, or the Mongols, like Genghis Khan, there was not a Han minority.
what makes a person a Han Chinese? Because, okay, being born in the royal family, that's a different story. But what makes a person Han Chinese versus Ming Chinese, for example?
These days, it's skin color, and this is also why you see a lot of women, even though they go to the beach, and when they're on the beach, they wear a face bikini. I'm like, what are you doing? And my wife, my wife she's also from the countryside, and she's not happy with having a darker skin. Everybody wants to have a lighter skin, so it's just skin color. And the lighter your skin is,
yeah. So in the Han Dynasty, they had something like that, and that's why now people just want to identify that.
Yeah, it's because of the Han Dynasty, but also because if you can work inside an office building, then you're not gonna have a tan, and then you're gonna have a lighter skin, right? So then you're supposed to be better than everybody else.
Prestige thing. So the conversation has flowed from semiconductors, from supply chain, from industrial environments, all the way to culture, all the way to history. That is so beautiful. One thing I want to understand regarding this culture part, and then I'll go back to our corporate life again. China is portrayed in a particular manner in Japan by Japanese historians and by Korean historians and by English Indian historians as well. All its neighboring countries have portrayed it in a particular manner. I have no comments on that, but I want to understand from you, how does China look at itself compared to its history and its relationships with its neighbors? Let's not go towards Europe. I'm talking about just its neighbors: Vietnam, Tibet, Bhutan, India, Japan, and Korea. How does China look at it? Recently, China celebrated its Independence Day because 70% of the land from China was actually conquered by Japan at one point. Hats off. But tell me, how does China look at itself with respect to its relationships with different neighboring countries?
So, person to person, people in China are very humble. But then on the country level, like China is the best, and China is going to conquer the world. Vietnam in Chinese is called Yunnan, and then the neighboring province is called Yunnan, which is part of China. And so, but it's almost the same. Yunnan. It's almost part of China, right? Same with Korea, same with Japan. It's just the same culture, and they have the same cultural backgrounds. And eventually, like of course, they're brothers, and they will keep the rule of law, and they'll never attack Japan or Korea, but they're like, no, they're just the same people as us. But they see that there's a lot of different minorities in China, and some minorities in other places in the world also could be part of China. So they see us, so they see them as friends. But for example, Vietnam, people in Vietnam, they're very, very close to the people in China who live close to Vietnam, and they could very easily be brought into the fold of China. Same with Myanmar. A big part of Myanmar is actually now controlled by China because they don't want to have any trouble. That's also why Xinjiang is part of China, because they need to have this kind of buffer zone. Xinjiang means new border, just like Ukraine means new border. It's just a border between great civilizations, great civilization of China and the great civilization of Afghanistan. So it's just a border area. Same with Ukraine. It's a border area.
When India writes about China and the headlines are a particular type, I'm sure you can imagine. When Europe writes about China, there's a particular connotation to the headlines. US, 100%. From that perspective, I want to understand, how does China either battles with those headlines or those connotations, or simply does not engage? And how does the Chinese government keep the people engaged with and keep the people's belief on them alive when it comes to different connotations being put on the Chinese government? That is a part I would like to touch upon a little bit, please, Hans.
Yeah, the Chinese government always wants to blame. Well, every government wants to blame the other, and that is and they're the righteousness, they're the rightfulness. So if Japan is saying something bad about China, then they just boycott certain products from Japan. It's just always ordering. It's like, read this book. It's a very Machiavellian. Like, everybody in China.
Tell the name of this book. Tell the name of this book.
So the name of this book is The Prince. But I'm sure you heard.
Bring it closer. There we go. Niccolo Machiavelli, The Prince.
Machiavelli.
Please go ahead, Hans. Talk about this book.
It's about power. It's about power and about politics and how to stay in power and how to create weak neighbors but be friendly with them and yourself being strong and making sure that your weak neighbors stay in power. So supporting your weak neighbors to always be weak and then making sure that no one can reach your borderlands. It's also it's even a thing in English speech, Machiavellian society. I only 25 pages of it, and it's a little bit the term has been a little bit controversial and it's been a little bit twisted, but it's all about power, and this is also what the US is doing. Like they just create weak neighbors, and this is how they stay strong.
Not personally speaking, by the way, I don't get any frustrations when I read the news because I know it's just a snapshot of what's happening today. But for many people, there's a lot of frustration when they hear the news and they feel that the world is coming to an end. But when you see the bigger picture, it all makes sense. Do you see there is similar frustration in a 75-year-old Chinese grandpa's life? 75 is not that old, by the way. 75, he's simply retired. He just wants to enjoy his life. Right? Do the Chinese people suffer from that concept as well?
Not really, because it doesn't get touched. It's just not allowed. But they are. I do see this. So in the past 5 years, going to China, there's a lot more nationalism because the economy is not going well. So then there's a propaganda knob has been turned up. So then there's a lot less. Not less friendly people. There's just some people who are less friendly, and that used to be not the case under the previous leader of China. Everyone was just friendly. You just come, but now you see a lot more racism, a lot more things against other people. And if you're from the countryside, you're being discriminated a lot more than you used to be discriminated against.
Wow. Okay. Very.
But
yeah.
But it all depends on the economic situation, right? Like if the situation, if the economy in China is going very well, then you don't need to have so much propaganda. If the economy is going bad, like it is now, then you need to have more propaganda to keep people happy.
I guess it happens to every country. There's nothing different. There's nothing different. Zero.
I know.
Zero.
It's just observation.
It is one of the observations, and it is one of the observations at least I relate to, and many people in this audience would also relate to, I'm sure. Hans, because I respect your time so much, I will soon let you go. However, I want to go back to our topic of industrial development on corporate, after all, because that's our audience. If you were designing, okay, I am an investor. I have invested, and that's my audience, common audience, by the way. If I am an investor and I am investing I'm creating my own ecosystem. It's global. It's getting there. I'm building a conglomerate. I have facilities in Europe. I have facilities in Germany and Netherlands. I have facilities in France. I have facilities in US, Texas, primarily. I have facilities in Ireland as well for a particular reason. I have facilities in the Middle East, and I'm trying to have facilities in China. So if I have a supply chain architect and I was designing the supply chain for 2040 from first principles, what would you deliberately keep global? 2040, remember, what would you keep global and what would you bring closer to Europe? And why would you do that? And what would you radically distribute further?
Global can be silicon production because it's just so high tech. But then PCBA manufacturing, that needs to be local. And making enclosures using an injection mold, that can be local, and that should be local. And chip production, it sits low weight, and this is what I would keep global. So yes, I would do the stuff that is very, very high tech. I would keep this on a global level, and everybody works together and researches together. There's an institute in Leuven. There's this Silicon Research Institute. Just keep it there, and then do production somewhere else, but then distribute the supply chain for for PCBAs and make that into a local thing. And then local for local. So in Europe, we do it for Europe. In China, you do it for China. Because so the reason I say this is because this gets a lot closer to the customer, and we don't all need the same electronics in the world. We don't all, for example, in China, there's this company called Techno. It's from Shenzhen, but this is actually the biggest smartphone manufacturing manufacturer for Africa. And they now have a production facility in Africa, and they have specific features for Africa. They have specific like light sensors, camera sensors for darker skin tones. So there's a big push coming for local production for local communities. So the closer you are to the consumer, the closer you are,
From the perspective of overall value allocation, yeah, localization is obviously the answer. It's just easier. You save many things in logistics as well as time zone. The efficiency that is lost in operating across time zones
but also I as the consumer know what I want. So of course I'm culturally much closer to what I want, to what other people from my culture want. So I'm very close to I produce it and I consume it. So I know what I want, and that's why I have a lot more insights than someone in China will ever have about what I want. I think it's very good to have this kind of conversation, like on every single level, right? And this is also what most people don't understand. Like, they don't understand the societal impact. They don't understand the cultural impact. They just understand the supply chain. And it's like, no, like, we do this for a reason, and this is the reason we do stuff. I really appreciate you doing this interview and putting this kind of content out there.
Thank you, Han. Thank you very much. This is my objective, that I look at things. I am a person who look at things holistically, and whatever the news tells me, whatever articles tell me, that's one small snapshot of the society. That's one small snapshot of the story that is being formed. Supply chain and the fact that companies are actually always dependent on one another. Countries are always dependent on one another. Every country has this national anthem, and trust me, I have sang multiple national anthems with a lot of pride for that country, by the way. I actually love all the countries I've lived in. So every single out there, their national anthem is extremely proud of who they are, and they're number one in the world. Perfect. Great. You need that. You need that mindset to keep the people happy and to keep the structure alive. But then
every anthem also has a line about the other and about the foreigner. They also have this. And yes. Why?
I have my theories on that one. I do believe, Hans, that you need a bit of either you need a comparison for yourself, because Korea and Japan constantly compares themselves to China. Japan and Korea are incredible countries. There's really no comparison, because they have constantly compared themselves to China. So you definitely need a reference point to build yourself up against. I wish actually many other countries would have that, would acknowledge the fact that they are actually, the population is made to look at another country, look at their neighbors, or look at another country as a reference point and see either they have come far or they need to learn from one another.
It's also the same as the Netherlands and Germany.
Yes, I was just gonna say.
And Germany wants to, like, the people from Netherlands want to compete with Germany.
And that's exactly what I wanted to say. Germany, if I look at European history, and forget about world wars, right? We don't talk about those things because we have learned our lessons. We have done our part. Everyone has contributed. We have been on this side or that side. Doesn't matter at this point. Now we are all industrialists. We want to have progress. Germany, whether you look at it from the Viking era, French Revolution era, the Roman times, and the contemporary history that we have today, Germany has been the epicenter in Europe. And Netherlands, the semiconductor equipment industry in the Netherlands benefited so much from the German engineering that was developed for the automotive as well as the Second World War and First World War. The technology advancement that was there was because the supply chain, the ecosystem, the manufacturing skills that are there in Germany was definitely because of the First World War, Second World War, and the automotive industry. These are the three primary reasons behind it. And because of that, the semiconductor equipment industry benefited massively. The precision mechanics industry, the precision mechanics companies that you see in the Netherlands here, they have a lot, either 90% of them have their manufacturing units in Germany, or at least they are owned by German companies. That's just how it is. That is how the situation is. And it's perfect. It's great because you learn from one another. You may compete, but you learn from one another. You compare yourself with one another. German companies also definitely compare themselves with the finance sector in Amsterdam, as well as the Luxembourg finance system. So that's a different story as well. So in Europe as well, it's the same, that people are made to look at their neighbors and see a reference point on how to improve, where to improve.
Yeah, okay.
Hans, I want to have one last topic, which is the topic that actually made me very curious, because I was having a conversation with you, and then you brought up this word called abundance and the abundance mindset that you see in China versus what you do not see outside. Enlighten the audience a little bit about it from your perspective and what we can all learn from the Far East Asian societies on the abundance mindset.
Yeah, funny that you bring it up just now, because I was thinking, can you have abundance without competition, right? And I do not know. But the abundance mindset is you produce something and you produce more than you need, just so you can have a better and healthier society. And there are certain farms where you can go to, and the farm system is like this. The only thing you need to do is you need to accept their food. So these farm systems are in Asia, but you also have some more of them in Europe, where they produce too much, and all you need to do is just go there and promise that you will consume it. This is also the mindset we need to have more in Europe. We can build whatever we want, and we can build more. We can look towards the future as if it's going to be better, and it is going to be better. In Asia, most people in Asia have this deal with the government. As long as the government makes sure that there's more products and there's more things to consume, and society is getting better every year, we'll be peaceful. We will not protest against you. Here in Europe, we know our society, the society where our parents came from, was very good, and we look up on it. But we think we cannot do better than that. And this is the abundance mindset that we need to have. We need to look forward to the future, not dystopian, not utopian, but realistic. We can make it better. That's what I tell my kids every single day. I don't care who you compete with. The only person you need to compete with is yourself yesterday.
Yes.
Get better than you are yesterday. That is the only thing you should do. And this mindset, it's sadly disappearing in Europe. People are very defeatist. People are reading dystopian stories. I love dystopian stories, but these days I prefer my kids reading solar punk stories about a future that we can build, and that we can build better than it is right now. Build Star Trek, don't build Star Wars. Build more systems so we can expand into the universe. We can expand into different society, into a better place. Don't look to your parents and say they had it better and we cannot make it better than them.
100%. I do also want to bring up this one particular thing, that Gen Zs are particularly quite pessimistic about their future. They're more pessimistic because of misinformation out there. You know what I mean? It's very
I'm
easy.
not so sure it's because of that. I think it's because they've been reading dystopian sci-fi. We grew up with utopian sci-fi. We grew up with Star Trek. We grew up with like Neuromancer. We grew up with sci-fi that is really expansionist. Not like the society is going to be destroyed and then we will build something better. We need to look forward to the future, to the faraway future. It's always going to be better. And it will always be better, and it's not going to collapse. And if it is going to collapse, it's still going to be better than it is today. I think it's not about information. It's about, because I think love is more powerful than fear. I think positivity is better than is still better than anger. And I still think people are more looking for connection and for bridges than for wars. I really believe in humanity this way. It's just that we need to send the right signal to our brothers who are younger, and to our kids.
It's a beautiful note to end the interview and the session with, because I'm not going to say anything more on this one, because it's a beautiful note. Thank you so much, Hans, for joining. Hans, how can somebody reach out to you? Quickly, give your email address out there if you want to. How can someone reach out for consultation or anything?
My email address is hans.stam@gmail.com. They can reach out to me for whatever, for philosophical questions, for engineering questions, for societal issues. I'm open for everything, as long as people engage in conversations, and as long as people realize that we can build something better. I actually hope to see you again in our show.